Welcome to Pass It On. This podcast is organized by the International Humanity Foundation, IHF, where we dive into inspiring stories of individuals dedicated to passing on kindness and hope. I'm your host, Darius, and in each episode, we'll explore the journeys of volunteers from all around the globe who have joined IHF.
Previously on Pass It On.
So that's how it comes like with me like idea. Okay, let's go to volunteer, and I was researching some organizations, and I saw IHF, which main effort is to give better education to everyone. So then I joined it, and I was like 1 year. I was volunteering from home as a remote job. I was leading the grants team. So in this world of research, I really like it.
Welcome to the third episode of our podcast, Pass It On. Can you believe we've already reached episode 3? It's truly a milestone, and I'm thrilled to have you all joining us again. Today's episode is extra special because we have some incredible guests. Allow me to introduce two incredible individuals who bring so much energy and passion to our team, Sylvia and Enekeme. Sylvia, the creative powerhouse leading our graphics team, and Enekeme, the driving force behind our HR and media efforts as our executive director. They'll be co-hosting with me today. Enekeme and Sylvia, how are you both doing today? Say hello to our lovely listeners.
Hi everyone, I'm Sylvia and I'm really happy to be here today.
Hi everyone, I'm Aniek Clemens. Very much happy to be here.
Thank you so much, Sylvia and Enekeme. It's a pleasure to have you both here with me today. And now the moment we've all been waiting for. We've got none other than the phenomenal Carol Sasaki, the founder and CEO of International Humanity Foundation, IHF. Carol's exceptional leadership and dedication have played a pivotal role in shaping IHF's journey. She's been recognized with numerous awards for her outstanding contributions, including being honored as a volunteer at the White House. Carol, it's an absolute honor to have you here today, ma. We're beyond thrilled to not only interview you, but to have some fun along the way too. Can you take a moment to introduce yourself and tell us your role within IHF?
Yeah, absolutely, sweet love. Grandma, the old grandma, tottering around, rolling balls in different directions. I started IHF long ago when I was in college, and now I'm the 70-year-old grandma to everyone.
Oh, we're so blessed to have you here, ma. Thank you so much for being with us today. Now, and as we dive into some inspiring discussions, I know we have a lot of burning questions for you, Carol. So, Sylvia, as the lead in graphics team, I know you must be eager to ask Carol some questions. Shall we start with?
Sure, I have a question to Carol. As the founder of IHF, what motivated you to start an NGO? I am really curious of that.
There are old articles in Reader's Digest and People Magazine, Family Circle Time that go over that. So I won't go in too much detail, but I left home very young. I was 12. I had a godfather who was renowned as a psychiatrist for children and was being abused sexually. And so I felt I would rather take a chance on making it or not making it on the streets, and that no one would believe me. One of the promises I made myself as I boarded the plane that I had babysit and house kept in order to earn the money for, and as I got on that plane, I thought, if I don't make it, I don't make it. But if I do, I swear to God, I will do everything I can with whatever success or power I can ever get to survive to make sure others don't go through this. And that was a very deep-seated feeling inside of me that regardless of whether I made it or not, it was I had to let go of that and just do it. And if I did, then I would help others in this moment. Um, so that was really kind of the kernel. And then it was the people who helped me when I was trying to survive on the streets, who were phenomenal human beings. That helped me. And then later, as an illiterate adult, which is an irony since I come from a upper middle class family on Mercer Island, Washington, with a very educated mother who became a dean of students, a father who headed the YMCA's, and then a stepfather who was a university president. It it was ironic that there I was not knowing some basics of education. And I believe that's because I was just born stupid and weird. And these things wouldn't have happened to me if I wasn't born that way. And I really believe that. So the people who helped me to have confidence that we each have a special gift. And if we can just learn what that gift is, trust in that gift, and have confidence in our individuality, instead of calling it weirdness, calling it a gift. That really propelled me. And then I made a kind of challenge once I was finally in college and able to my astonishment, thanks to these folks, get into college. It was how in the world, when I've learned how you think A to B to C, linear, very thin to do college and academics, but for the streets and survival, you think A to Y to X to L all over the place in order to know what's happening in back of you and expect anything at any moment. That learning how to think academically soared me into getting A's and getting awards. And I thought, how in the world is it that I have the same brain? It hasn't changed, no brain transplant. And yet I was considered stupid and weird by everyone. And as soon as I learned how to play this game in a different way of thinking, I'm getting A's in all these awards. Well, this isn't right. So I made the challenge to my university that let me go and get a dozen people from the streets, from your food lines, your homeless shelters. Let me work with them for several months. And if they can pass the exam, can we give some of these scholarships to them? And I was very bold and ended up kind of having a confrontation with the university president because I got together a bunch of single mother women to make noise. And Glenn Terrell and I became really close friends. And that confrontation and his deciding there was something in me, I think my passion to make sure other people didn't feel stupid and worthless the way I had felt, the black sheep of the family, and discovered that if they just learn things, they can do things that have nothing to do with who they are. It's just what they're doing and how that they're taught. Um, that experiment went really well, and it grew, and then it grew into different states, and word got passed around between the different universities and then to the governors, and then the governors wanted me to come and start the program in their state. In the meantime, I was a single mother also working her way through graduate school. So people like Glenn Terrell, the president, helped me to learn some management skills. And that led into getting a scholarship to go on a world trip. And on that world trip, just very briefly, as I was doing a study of how our system compares to other systems, whether it's in Europe, Africa, Asia, it was very in depth. It was scary because I was leaving my son, and my son, that's what was my everything. And to leave him to do this was a huge decision. But I also felt that magnet. And And that's when I ran into sexual slavery and ultimately ended up being taken, and an amazing person, Ramu, um, literally gave his life so I could escape, and diverted them. And I had to escape and then hide in the bushes outside of, it was called Bombay then instead of Mumbai, out of the police station while I listened to him being tortured to death, very keenly aware that he had given his life in hopes I would take the information that I had collected back to the US and those governors and folks I was now working with. So that brought about another vow in me that had very deep roots, because you obviously have the pain that he and the children that we were trying to rescue that had been kept naked in cages, what they went through as they were beaten until their sound was gone. And that stayed with me in terms of not just the ugliness of it, but also that connectivity that they wanted me to escape, irregardless of me as a personality. But again, having to do with what we do and how we do it, being separate from our worth, but being a functioning skills you can learn, that they felt it that much connection with the other women being trafficked and what was happening, that they did this. And that, of course, those deep roots then connected with the childhood roots. And little did I know, at that point, it was more like a wind blowing through me, and a connection with all humanity. But I had no idea of the deep joy and all the moments of joy that would radiate through my life out of such painful experiences. So that's what motivated me.
Wow. Well, your courage is the reason why we're here. And um I'm just going to say that you you didn't have to go through that. You did, and it just only made you stronger, and the impact you have on me and everyone is something that you should look back at and be proud, and be that at the end it was all, I don't even know, even it was all worth it. So I'm really, really glad, and you're really, really brave, and I'm really pleased that I've gotten to know you. So thank you so much for sharing. The next question, you mentioned something about the accidents. Yeah, you've mentioned it to us while working. So the next question is like this. What, like working, you also said you worked with two US presidents. Now, can you just make a little bit about that?
Honey, there's a wobbly connection, so I'm not hearing you clearly, darling. What, can you repeat the question, sweetie?
Okay, I say, you've mentioned that you worked with two US presidents. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure, sure. Actually, I've worked with 3 US presidents. I'll start
My bad.
with Carter first, because we just were talking about the trafficking of children for war and sex, and for my particular area, even though many feminist groups and women don't like me using the term, I insist on using it, and that is sexual slavery and sexual slaves, because that's what they are. And no one would believe me, literally. And remember, I was at that point working for governors, had some fairly close friendships with several governors. It had not received the presidential award or anything yet, but still, I had a lot of connections for my naivete and age. But yet, no one would believe me. For my work in the US, I was supposed to go on to several shows, and I did, that were national shows, but the Oprah Winfrey, she was fairly new then, and literally said, if it was true, we would have heard about this, Carol. And I realized there's this huge gap in information that it has to go through so many levels before it gets to the top, that it gets vastly distorted. And a lot of stuff is easy to cover up, and that the players themselves have lovely personalities, and no one would ever guess that they're involved in trafficking, and they're often admired. So that feeling of how do I deal with this when no one will believe me? At a large lecture at my university when I was graduating, they had me speak in the graduation, and I was literally booed off. A renowned scientist who had given a lot of attention to my university stood up and came on stage and said, she is lying. This does not happen in my country, India, or anywhere. And you all know it doesn't happen in the US, and blah, 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 blah. And by then I had several women who were involved. Rose was the most outspoken, who talked about her experience, which is usually very dangerous for people to do. But everyone was too scared to talk about it. They would be seen as a nut. And I was booed off the stage. And it really, at that point, so young in my age, my ego, and especially from my childhood, whenever something happened where lots of people thought I was awful, that would go deep in me and crush me. So the whole issue was very, here people had died, no one would believe me. And of course, that reminded me of my godfather and being young and never telling anyone, which is the beautiful transformation that has happened in the world recently. Women being able to talk about things. Both of my grandparents went through it, my grandmothers, and shared it with me. So it's been going on a long time. Guess who believed me? And guess who became involved? President Jimmy Carter. And I don't know if the world is really aware of that. He, before others ever got involved, when there were no grants or money behind it, so there was, just this, it couldn't exist or we would know about it feeling. Jimmy Carter, this wonderful woman named Kunyin Kanita in Thailand who worked with me, and she was raised with the royal family, was president of the Association for Attorneys for Thailand. And she gave up a lot for her reputation and was thought of as awful for standing up about what's going on. And she took me into her home. I was still this young college student, but she took me into her home in Thailand. And we tried to write to 60 Minutes, this TV show in the US. We tried to get the governors to, nobody wanted to touch it or believed it, which I can understand because I don't watch documentaries, or I can't handle it. I can live it and work on it, but I can't. It's hard to read about detached. What do you do with this information, especially when it's the third largest source of income flowing through the world? Trafficking of humans and arms. In fact, they think it's overcome the trafficking of arms. I don't know if that's accurate or not. So Jimmy Carter alone, quietly, and Rosalind Carter came and stayed with us while I was staying those months with Kunyin Kanita, and they went out and quietly tried to push this this problem. I won't go into more on it, but he's a very, very precious human being to me. And even though my relationship wasn't as long-term or involved as with the other two, at a very deep level, he had the deepest roots by his example of doing stuff that nobody would never ever know about, just because he believed in it. And even though it could give him pushback, quietly just going and doing and doing, that part of him and Rosalind just will never leave me. Those worker bees of the world, whether they're president or the garbage collector, and understanding the importance of small actions as they come before us instead of making big splashes. That was Jimmy Carter. Then I had working with Reagan, and he had very different politics from mine. He called me his rebel. I was very angry and upset about a lot of his politics, especially in terms of when I was a college student, apartheid and in South Africa, et cetera. We had really different politics, and yet Reagan allowed me to bring in women from all walks of life. It didn't matter if they were sex workers or rural religious women who were terrified to stand up on a stage and to role play. They're trying to legally work the system with its rules to become self-sufficient. And he allowed me to do this training with each of the major departments, so that it could affect women in prison, it could affect your Department of Education, your Department of Housing, welfare system, etc. So that was a marvelous opportunity to make very real practical changes within rules and regulations that I don't think the world is aware of that he did. In spite of many things he did I disagreed with, he did some phenomenal stuff that did have very practical impact. And the irony is, for someone whose politics I disagreed with greatly, he ended up being very dear to me. And there were particular moments that have stayed with me. Having lunch with him when he first came back from Russia and said, isn't it funny? He always says, little rebel, isn't it funny, little rebel? They're exactly the same as us. It doesn't matter if they believe completely different. They're just as precious as us. It's kind of like you and me, isn't it? And his eyes just filled with tears. And that has stayed with me, that IHF, that when I did the home program, the migrant save, that it not involve politics, but whatever it is the issue we're working on. So we don't get divided by that, especially when it comes to the welfare of young children that are this world's tomorrow. So there are many different things, lessons from Reagan. And then ironically, Chuck Hobbs, his director of domestic policy, Charles Hobbs, Chuck hired me separately, not knowing I was informally meeting with and consulting with Reagan. And then they found out one day, and I thought they had hired me together. I didn't know that. So that was hilarious. And I ended up being able to do and had a very dear friendship with Chuck Hobbs, who was Reagan's, went back to his early days. And what Chuck taught me and Reagan was the difference between big C capitalism and small c capitalism, and that we really had to protect small c capitalism or the individuality of humans would be lost. And that was a profound lesson, and there are some stories around that I won't go into. And then lastly was Clinton. Clinton was not as long term with as many stories as with Reagan and Chuck years, those White House years. But he was an important lesson, even if it was less close of a friendship in one sense. In another sense, I'm very thankful when I would give keynotes. He flew in I think it was 5 different lectures to introduce me when he was very busy. So I really was thankful for that. Um, he helped a lot of the women. We had 250,000 throughout the US, women and young boys and women on the streets and those on welfare that were sharing information as a communication channel of how can they help each other to become educated and self-sufficient in the ways they had done it. And Clinton met with them separately many times. I have tension with Clinton because at the hotel in Arkansas, when we first met, we did talked and talked and talked about AmeriCorps, and then he called me afterwards and talked through the night. This is when we first met. And he had come to one of my lectures and workshops, and it was a real honor, and I just really thought that what a great guy. But he developed that AmeriCorps program as if it was his own, never mentioning even the name and everything else that we had developed. So that part hurt me, that he kind of claimed it as his own, and I've never said anything about it or gone public about it in any way. But I did kind of, between that and some other things that came up with some of the female recipients and stuff, I kind of withdrew during his White House years. But when I look back at my age on those years, I have no desire to contact or get involved. I see in a different perspective how much he helped so many of our women, again, like Jimmy Carter, though in a different way, help them without any notoriety. There was a young gal in Texas, and he really needed Texas to be signing on to a program he was trying to legislate. And the governor, she was pregnant by her father, who was a Supreme State judge there, and wanting to get away, and wasn't able to. And he put himself on the line to help her with that. Ironically, Governor Clements gave me an award, never knowing what I was doing in the background. But I was, so there are parts of Clinton that I really admire. At the same time, it's like Chuck said to me, Chuck's best friend was Governor Celeste of Ohio, who was very liberal and very opposite Chuck's politics. And as Chuck said, it's not about the politics, it's about the heart of the person and how much that person sincerely wants to help others versus promote their image as helping others or promote the image. It's something you just feel about someone, Carol. And I think it's what I felt about you when I met you at the White House. And that stayed with me because it wasn't true about me. As I told him, I was very fragile in terms of my image and what people think of me. And if I hadn't had those lessons, I don't think I would have survived in order to even do little tiny IHF. I've had to have people write that I'm a liar and the devil and horrible things online. And if I hadn't learned from these amazing people to realize that an image is not who we are, and if we care what other people think of us instead of what we think of them, um, we will never have the strength to carry through with anything that can bring deep joy and fulfillment. So I think that's the main thing. I learned from all three of them, though also, as I mentioned, many other lessons that are individual to each of them. And that's it.
Thank you so much, Ma, for sharing. I've learned lessons as well. So thank you. Okay. So since he is, Sylvia, Um, you're an Indonesian, and I'm sure you have some question concerning, like, regarding that. So, way.
Yes, I really have like question and I'm really curious about this. So, one of these IHF centers is located in Indonesia, right? Namely in Medan, Bali, and Jakarta. So, I'm really curious, how did you come to establish the IHF center in these places? And why did you choose Indonesia as one of the IHF centers?
I love that question. Love that question. You can imagine as the years went on, you're talking from when I was a young college student, not married, to married and my daughter born, and my daughter wanted to go to some of the place. I did the lecture circuit for many years with my son, and after marriage, had kind of toned that down. And my daughter wanted to go to some of those places. So we did. And one of my first women from 1984, Asa and Apia in Thailand, the Aka tribe. They said I would not be back, and they felt like there was just too many of them. They were one in a herd of cattle all over the world, and I would forget them. We lost them over the years. I lost them, and I searched for them with my daughter. And one night, I won't go into that, but one night we finally found her. And I knew it was her from her broken back. She had jumped out of a window when they brought in young 10, 11-year olds, which was the age she had originally been taken. And there was an opportunity to just jump down to the street because a customer had opened a window to flick his cigarette, and she just ran out of that and through the glass and went down. And she had scars from that, and a back that was very curved from that. But she ended up doing the rescue and saving those children. I recognized her on this street from that curved back. And just a feeling through me, this is my Asa, this is my Asa. And I had been told by everyone, Gallup, New York Times Magazine, everyone had said, we've tried to find her for you. There's no way you will find her, blah, blah, blah. She wasn't her sister, Vicky. Everyone told me that you just won't find her. And we found her. And that meant my daughter was living with me and children who had been in sexual slavery while we were trying to do rescues, while I didn't want my daughter to know what was going on, really. I just didn't want that affecting the delight of her childhood. So it was an exhausting role. Uh, how do you do this and protect your daughter from that? And she had deep friendships with some of the younger ones. Fortunately, the language gap kept it apart. I asked them, is there anywhere where I won't find this that's close enough where I can protect my daughter and she can just kind of rest? I had heard before, and several told me that for some reason, no one knows why, trafficking of children for sexual slavery is not as prominent in Indonesia. And I had experience through North Africa, Middle East. I thought that's just, it can't be because of the Muslim, because that's there. I don't understand. What is it about that culture? And I'm not sure I believe it. So I ended up, for both research purposes and also wanting a place where my daughter could rest, going to Indonesia, Jakarta, then Bali. And found that through the Australian consulate, there was trafficking going on, but it was through Australia, not in the same manner where it was coming from the depths of the culture itself, as in in most places, including in the US. It was being done through authorities in Australia, and in fact, was trying to be stopped by people feeling voiceless in Indonesia and doing activities at the bars where they were running it through, etc. In fact, that is part of the backstory to the Bali bomb that the world doesn't realize, but is quite easy to prove. So that for me became a resting place. Also, I was fascinated. What is it about this place that some of what I experience all over the world is simply not happening? And yet, on the surface is rampant. There's corruption on the surface. It's you can see it everywhere. And yet, these other, what do I call them, illnesses, these other haven't gone rampant in this culture. So my fascination with Indonesia was birthed out of my exhaustion from trying to deal with the issue of trafficking. And we vacationed there, and then the banking crisis hit. And then the poverty and the people we had gotten to know there, and I had to do something. So started the center there. Also, as I was learning about the education, that there is a very practical solution for Indonesia because it has this phenomenal respect of all these different religions written into its constitution in a manner that even the US doesn't have. And if any day it can actually follow it with the richness of this culture that kind of protects in a way that I don't find anywhere else in the world, if it can get past the corruption, and that can be done if there is that education and how to find answers for oneself. And because the internet was blossoming from the 80s and 90s, we were using it in the 80s and 90s already. It was just a different form. It was that dial in and different. Um, it seemed all the more possible. So my daughter also fell deeply in love with Indonesia, and we would just go around. I still had quite a bit of money from the being on the lecture circuit and all that. So I had it, going back to my childhood promise, told myself that if I made millions, whatever money was to go into this purpose. Plus, I loved living simply. I love that because it's less of a headache. So my daughter and I would start little projects, and we began teaching under the freeways in Jakarta and in Bali. We bought some property and built a place, and it was to be, she said, my daughter said, I want to live somewhere at times where I cannot feel silly for painting my fingernails and being just silly, mom. And that just struck me to the core that every human being needs that. There's just, I don't want her to drown in the sorrow of things happening in the world and lose that delight and joy and the giggling happiness in each moment. That, by the way, is something also profound that hit me whenever I would be back in my own home country. That children, I didn't hear the same day in, day out, and in their sleep giggling. And it was like, we have so much compared to the poverty. Why do their eyes seem older, sadder, and there's not the giggling? And how do we become educated without being overwhelmed by all we're learning? Whereas previously in society, it was only the problems immediately around us. So Indonesia was an ideal protection for Crystal also, and kind of an idyllic world she could rest in. So she went to the international school there. I used to run international schools in the US here when I was taking a break from everything to just be home with my daughter. I was a supervisor for those schools, and she attended one, and so did my son, the high school, and she attended the younger grade. So I enrolled her in that school. And then, of course, the issue of sexual slavery was moving into Bali with tourism. And I ended up then getting involved, especially as was going on with the consulate. And we did form a IHF chapter and make it a formalized part of IHF. But that's how Indonesia became involved. At the point at which I separated IHF from SAVE, which is back in the 90s. So we're talking from mid 80s, 1984, to the millennium. It was after the millennium celebration in 2000. We had our uh, separation then, and some friends here in the US who were on the board forever and ever and ever until we all got too old. Um, helped in picking the name, and the idea of separating IHF was so that we were tackling that information gap problem I talked about, that you see with not just the issue of trafficking, but with so many issues. And that those who live within the communities and have gone through various problems and intimately involved in them need those same tools to lead as my president of my university and the different governors and people I had the privilege of learning from. They need those same lessons so that they can do the same thing in their lives. And that kind of went to Indonesia also, not just the areas where we were doing SAVE. And that's when it was actually Patty. I was cleaning my closet in Rancho Santa Fe, California, and on the phone with her, chatting about I have to get ready to leave again, fly out again. And Crystal's really anxious for us to fly out again. She misses her friends there, blah, blah, blah. And I said, I need help. And I can't, my passion is to teach them the skills to direct and start their own programs, not to build another big program. I did what I did in the US. It got legislated. I don't want to do it again. I want to help others to do that because it has such impact and they're the authorities. And she said, why don't you just separate it? Separate it so that it's not dangerous for volunteers to be involved because they won't be working with mafia and cartels. They won't be working with the trafficking. Just separate it, make it like a school. Let them run your centers and work with the communities, honey. And I went, oh my God, Patty, that's so simple. Why don't I do that? And that's when IHF became separated. So Indonesia was the first place where IHF was IHF and not IHF separating out of SAVE, where I had to somehow, in order to make it not dangerous for the volunteers, completely separate it. And that took quite a few years because when you rescue a child, that's a huge commitment. It's like adopting. If it's ever found out that that child indeed can talk and tell things and tell on people, their punishment will be burning down their village, killing their relatives. And I've experienced that sorrow um, firsthand. And that's why when people say you should feel proud of what you do, that's impossible. I can't do what I do other than for the joy that it gives me because of the incredible angels I've had through my life. Just phenomenal angels like you folks. But if I put it into a context of feel good or bad about your actions and own them, I would cease to be able to work because not all rescues have worked, because horrible things have happened, including one village, everyone being locked in and it being burnt um, because of the children there being rescued and a lesson needing to be taught. I can't think in terms of results and do what I do. If I think in terms of results, I would burn out. if I think in terms of each moment and what feels right and what the people are wanting and expressing, then I can get each moment has its joy and its connection. But if I'm attached to results, I would have burnt out a long time ago. So Indonesia is a very special, unique place in the world. Every country is. Every single country has something in depth and gorgeous about it, and things that aren't. There is no Shangri-La. In fact, those that seem the most Shangri-La often have a very ugly, deep underbelly. It's just what life is. And there's no place that is other than that. But I do have a special love for Indonesia.
Impressive. Thank you so much, Ma. Thank you. I'm sure Indonesia is grateful to you, as I am. Thank you so much. And Nikki, are you back now? Can you ask Grandma the next question you have?
Okay, thank you very much. I'm back.
Hi, sweetie.
The information. I'm fine, ma. Okay, ma. Given your extensive experience, particularly with IHF, ma, when you look back, what will you say is the IHF?
Honey, I got, when you look back, what will you say is the, and then you went blank. Can you finish?
Okay, ma. Let me rephrase the question. Okay, ma. Clear with IHF. What has been the most rewarding moment of your journey with this organization?
Oh my God, that's so easy. You guys, that's so easy to say. I just got pictures this morning for Edel Vitri from Ayu, who's now grown, and a mama, and from Ade, and it just and Rama. It's just she's no longer a little girl to pick up. The joy of I the biggest, I feel like I don't have enough room inside me. It's like when the sun is coming up and it's rising, and make more room inside me for the happiness and joy. I never knew that growing old is so delicious, and that each moment feels so timeless and eternal and full of the lives that I've been so blessed to know. Pratya was, I mean, his stepdad trafficked children at the train station, getting young kids that were coming from the village because of the rice famine to try to survive somehow they'd be taken into sexual. He was trained to do that. And here he is, a lawyer helping these children. Nelson, from oh my gosh, we've gone through hell in Kenya. And look at some of them. Nelson is now not just a doctor, but a surgeon, and he kept his promise to pass it on. And he started a clinic out in Pakat where I oh, there's so many stories. I buried a child who was dead on the road because I had to get to the airport, and her grandma said, we will walk to the clinic. We can walk. It was so far to get to the hospital. And it's just the flu and her fever. But she didn't have a blue book and the little bit of money it costs for a blue book that Nomadic don't have. And so she died on the way. And we stopped the truck because we had to go back for something. And there she was. There's 10,000 stories, but it's like, why did I do that? I can't handle making decisions and flying to a place where there's too much of everything, yet people are unhappy, and then flying to a place where they're starving. And I watched the nomadic children playing with bones of humans, and then flying to, I can't be in this weird position of you fly between different realities and making decisions that are going to be too wrong too many times. I can't be God. I have to give it to a bigger river and just do moment by moment. And now I get to look back at that river and see whatever decisions I made, there's something flowing much bigger regardless of that, and feel that eternal time that we all are and that connects us. And I get to experience it in these now grown lives that are passing it on. I have been so blessed in my life. How can I not feel joyful? It's just been incredible. So the answer is angels like you who say, damn it, I want my life to leave this world a better place somehow. And I want to feel connected to people and life somehow. And that means more to me than 20 TVs and 20 cars. I want to learn these skills. Angels like you guys that I've been so blessed to know. I've worked with the worst of human beings when it comes to the trafficking and the corruption, even in any organization. Whenever you're working with vulnerable populations, you're going to have layered cons by people who talk so lovingly and have the most perfect personalities. And you can't be attached to that. You can't even ask yourself to trust people in order to love. But in the end, the river, oh my God, the river is people like you guys that I've been so blessed to work with. So that's my easy answer. I know immediately. Like you, Anika May, and Selvia and Doris.
Thank you, Ma.
Catch up on all the heartwarming moments and inspiring stories from our previous episodes of Pass It On. Join the discussion and immerse yourself in the journey of kindness and goodwill towards humanity. Tune in to our podcast on YouTube at IHF Online and Spotify at Bridges of Humanity. Don't miss out on spreading positivity and making a difference. Pass it on.
Next on Pass It On.
You indicated that starting an NGO like IHF can be like IHF, but any NGO without substantial funds is visible. How did you navigate these challenges while establishing the foundation of an NGO with limited resources?
Oh, excellent question. Oh, good. I was a single parent with all the kind of stuff that goes with that, trying to get through graduate school, which meant I was working several jobs as what's called work-study program in the US, and a mother needing to make sure I had time with my child, and doing over full-time classwork because I had a scholarship that was going to end, and it would cover however many classes I was taking. So I had truly overextended myself at the point I